focused on political education, democracy development. So we educate more than 5,000 people in Ukraine, but mostly people from local councils, people from non-profit. So it's basically my focus, and maybe you read some materials from our institute, which we wrote for SEPA, for Wilson, which more connect with good governance, fighting with disinformation, and other like vectors of political science research. Full my background you can find as background of other speakers in agenda and in report, but we are really honored to support with partners very important veteran affairs issue, which honestly a new vector for me, but Vitaly, Irina, Nadia, Oksana, they also encourage us to, work on this vector of policy. So what we will discuss today, I must mention that like 1 month ago, we have big discussion in Kiev. It was 55 speakers last time, and we have position from people who have experience in forming veteran affairs, like a policy, from United States, from Great Britain, from Israel. So it was 8 countries, right? 8 countries, yeah. So Irina basically coordinates that, yeah. And it was great. If you didn't saw this discussion, you can saw it in internet, and it was the same name but part 1. And we will share it with you. Also, we involve people who directly serve in army, because it's it's very DC thing to talk about issue sometimes without people who directly like work in this issue. So that's why we engage a lot of veterans and a lot of people on active duty to make our policy discussion more practical, because generally these people will, be beneficiary of this discussion. So after first part of discussion, we connect all non-profits. So we share their contacts, and they feel free to contact each other, and feel free to contact also office who work on first part of document and on report. So our partners generously present this report for us. So a general overview of veteran affairs policy in United States and in Ukraine. Of course, we can't copy just like, system of United States, because you never can copy like policy from one country and put it to policy to other country. But in this document, which called Building Bridges, you can see main differences and main point where like United States can give good example and good roadmap how to build veteran affairs policy in Ukraine, and also how we can build cooperation, because now in Ukraine a lot of projects of technical help, a lot of projects with municipalities. So for example, new education for new professions for veterans. It's government task, but it's also task for local councils to work on. So, and it's also vector of cooperation with like United States veteran affairs, with United States people in municipality, politicians, non-profits, and so on and so forth. So please feel free to grab one of these reports. Also, we add, as it was Women's History Month, we add part of women's veteran policy, because it was written like last month. And next step, it's today's discussion. So today's discussion will be more speech on cases, so how it's technically work, right? And after that will be one more analytical paper and report about direct medical, psychological, and economical adaptation, but also with vectors of potential projects for cooperation. And after that, every nonprofit and every stakeholder here in this room in National Press Club can say, hey, let's work with this nonprofit on, for example, economical adaptation of veterans, on a new profession and adaptation them, for example, to IT works, or something else, or writing direct policy and bills and helping members of Ukrainian parliament to do this like good legislation. So it's main practical aim of our work, and it's on the fridge between like analytical think tank work and practical work and platform for cooperation. So that's why, of course, feel free to meet each other. On this event, I think we have 17 speakers who represent, obviously, around 15 different organizations. So feel free to say hello each other and do also networking in coffee break. And about main issue, we must understand, if you're not originally from Ukraine, you must understand that it will be from 3 till 5 million of veterans in Ukraine. So it's very unique case in history, generally, as social impact of war and social impact of Russian aggression, and we must work very hard to handle all vectors on that. And I'm originally from Kherson, so I'm just moved here like 2 years ago, but my father under sanction of Russian Duma because he was against Russia when they occupied Crimea, and I understand what is Russian army is, how cruel they are, and what they can do if we can, give to them opportunity to moving forward. So that's why we want to encourage you to really active participate. We open for all initiatives who want to work on this platform. And if you have some direct ideas, please give this idea that, hey, I'm searching for partners in like this project, and maybe somebody from this room will be your partners. One more housekeeping note, we have Zoom with translation to Ukrainian and from Ukrainian to English. So it's the same Zoom link which you get to your email. So if some speakers will speak on Ukrainian, you can listen this Zoom or ask our professional Pavlo to help you with this issue. I'm not sure if somebody needs translation to Ukrainian, but if so, please ask Pavlo how to do that and how to connect. So it's be directly on timing, so it's 8:30, and still we waiting our first moderator. Maybe I will involve speakers of first panel. But before, I encourage you to listen greeting from person whom I'm admire of his energy, and I originally live in his district. It's Representative Raskin, who one of the main ambassador of Ukraine in Congress. So he have some points for us. And let's listen his points about veteran affairs. So Pavlo, if you can help with that, thank you.
Hey, it's Congressman Jamie Raskin from the great state of Maryland, the United States of America. And I wanted to greet everybody participating in the conference on creating an effective veteran policy in Ukraine and what can be learned from international experience there. I preface my remarks just by restating my passionate and ardent support for the Ukrainian people as you face a second year of your heroic resistance under the brutal and imperialistic invasion by Vladimir Putin and his henchmen. I want to communicate unrelenting and unanimous support from the Democratic Party forces in the United States Congress for the Ukrainian cause, and we are with you in spirit and in mind, and we are doing everything we can to get you more support as quickly as possible. We understand that Vladimir Putin continues to be an existential threat to the safety and the security of the Ukrainian people and your democracy and your freedom. I know today you're talking about creating an effective veteran policy for Ukraine. And the American perspective has some things to offer there. We have a Veterans Administration whose job is to meet the health needs and the housing needs and the professional needs of our veteran population. And this goes back many decades in our country. We have paid attention recently to veterans who have been the victims of exposure to toxic substances. In our Honoring Our Pact Act, we have made certain that any veterans who have been exposed to toxic burn pits or other hazardous waste sites will be treated routinely as a matter of course for their injuries and will not have to prove causation in the event that they come down with an illness that is related to toxic exposure. The great sacrifices and commitments of Ukrainian soldiers should motivate lawmakers in your country to protect the current generation of veterans and future veterans, just as the United States did in the wake of World War II and also did in the wake of the Civil War back in the 1860s. And of course, our great President Abraham Lincoln spoke of the moral necessity of binding up the nation's wounds and taking care of the widows and the children left behind with the loss of so many soldiers. But you also are making the proper commitment to provide benefits to veterans who lived through the war. And we did that too with our famous GI Bill, with education and loan and housing assistance. And you can do the exact same thing to make sure that all of the multidimensional needs of the veteran community are addressed. Caring for veterans is a constant and a continuing focus of lawmakers in America today. So we support you in this process as well as in everything you're going through to try to summon up the resources and the commitment, the energy to resist Vladimir Putin and his terrible assaults on the Ukrainian people. We will pass a bipartisan military and security assistance package. The Democrats at least are fighting for another $61 billion infusion of aid to the Ukrainian cause, and we will not rest until we make that happen. I want to thank Katrina Odarchiko for inviting me to participate in these proceedings, and I am sending you my great admiration, my affection, and my solidarity as you go about creating an effective veteran policy for the heroic men and women who have gone to the front lines to fight for the people of Ukraine and for freedom and democracy in Europe and throughout the world. Thank you very much.
I was elected as a member of parliament in Ukraine back in 2015, and since then I am engaged in the veteran direction. Unfortunately, I can say that our legislation is not modern enough and does not meet the challenges of nowadays, especially when it relates to a full-scale invasion of Russian Federation in Ukraine. We are doing our best to update and modernize the legislation. We learn the experience of the world nations in order to borrow the best in the legislation that provides for veterans and serving personnel, its welfare, social support during the service and after the service. Keeping in mind the long-lasting experience of cooperation with United States of America, number of projects of supporting veterans, service personnel and civilians, we would like to take the best developed by the United States and introduce in our respective national legislation to make effective and efficient in supporting our service personnel, veterans, providing them rehabilitation, social, mental and physical, supporting veterans, PTSD affected, family members, especially those who lost their closed ones and who sacrificed their most valuable, their life defending Ukraine. And while we are got together this time, I would suggest and I would encourage all engaged, all the stakeholders, US colleagues, Ukrainian colleagues joining via Zoom. So I suggest to get together as frequent as possible and offer suggestions and amendments to our legislation, and I'm as the head of a respective committee would do my best to introduce that to our legislation to rehabilitate our defenders as quick and efficient as possible. And I also would like to thank the United States for their support in these difficult and challenging times taking place in Ukraine since the large-scale invasion, and for wider support of United States to Ukraine. We understand that there are certain issues that taking place in the United States, but we do hope that this support that US provides would not be lost, and we will continue our advancement to that democratic direction. Thank you for the invite. God bless United States and God bless Ukraine, jointly together to the victory.
Proposals on a variety of areas, whether it's politics, security, energy, education, and whatnot. And at the same time, we are co-located with Bay Atlantic University and NECE, accredited university. NECE is the New England Commission for Higher Education, and we offer courses in social sciences and information technology as well, both undergraduate and graduate. We've just celebrated our 10th anniversary this year, and for whatever it's worth, since we are here in the National Press building, our building used to be the world headquarters of United Press International, for whatever it's worth. So that's a little bit of my little commercial, if you wish, about our organization. But without further ado, I would like to ask our panelists to give as Katarina said, short introductory remarks, and then we'll get the conversation going. Madame, let's start with you.
Well, thank you. My name is Phyllis Wilson. I served in the Army, United States Army, for 37 years. The key part that I think brings me here is in 2015, 2016, I was a senior fellow for the Chief of Staff of the United States Army. And we were asked, 20 of us, to look at what the future of the world would be out to 2050. And this was in 2015. So I traveled as a European expert all across Europe, talking with NATO, the European Union, and a number of other officials across Europe, asking them what they foresaw. And we got some things right. Some of those things we saw upheaval 2021, 22. We saw the use of drone swarms, which sadly we're seeing in the Ukraine now. Some of the things that we made political bets on that we then informed the United States Army's senior leadership, we would like to believe was the genesis of Futures Command, United States Futures Command, which then is looking at how we can support on the planning and moving things into production far faster than the typical way that the United States military does business with the defense contractors. Secondarily, after I retired in 2018 from the United States Army, I became the president of the Military Women's Memorial, and I learned a great deal about military women that I did not know in the 37 years that I served. The 3 million women that have defended this country, of that, 2 million women veterans are living today. There are 20 million U.S. veterans, so 10% of the veteran population in the United States are women. But we're making up 20% of the currently serving. And one of the things that I thought was really powerful and compelling as I look at what's happening with Ukraine and what this means, ideally when this war comes to an end sooner rather than later, is when I went off to the first Gulf War, when I went to Iraq and Afghanistan, I went to another country. And when I came home, everything here was as I left it. There were no decimated buildings. There were no problems with infrastructure like what I see in Ukraine. And I think that's one of the key psychological pieces that we as Americans have got to incorporate into the lessons learned and the futuristic planning of how do we support Ukraine. They will have daily reminders. Now, for me as a woman that served with Joint Special Operations, there's certain smells, there's sounds, and there are photos that might pop up on the TV that take me right back to where I was. Those are intermittent. And I think one of the key things we really must consider, it will be constant and enduring. We really have to liken it back to the end of World War II and the Marshall Plan. And I feel like those are the kind of things that we must consider in the future in rebuilding Ukraine, is how quickly can we get it back on its feet, and remembering that, of course, not only have women supported their men as they've gone off to war. I understand there's approximately 60,000 women that are in uniform now in Ukraine serving on the front lines and in support roles. So I think that's really important that we capitalize and think about that to the future.
Thank you very much to our colleagues and our host today. I'm Peter Husey, and just a correction for the record, I left the Hudson Institute last August. I'm with the National Institute for Deterrence Studies as a senior fellow, and I'm president of Geostrategic Analysis, which is my company that I founded in 1981. When I went to work as a consultant to the United States Air Force, my primary job was to help them with Capitol Hill. What is Congress going to do about our major acquisition programs? And what I'm going to say today is kind of my advice that I've heard from a number of people I talked to over the last couple of weeks about we're going to set up a Veterans Administration, what you ought to take into account in terms of our experiences. First thing is, don't copy the U.S. acquisition model. It takes us 13 to 14 years to take something in pencil and paper on a pad of paper and get it to the field. If the iPhone industry did that, they'd all be dead. And I don't mean that literally, I mean that in terms of financially. So you've got to be able to, what we call spiral development. As something comes in, put it back into the system. That's very, very important. For Veterans Administration, here are some lessons I think we've learned. Number one, let a veteran go to any hospital, any clinic, any doctor in your country. Do not set up a separate channel of they only can go to VA hospitals. What if they're 4.5 hours away from that hospital and they have chronic issues? Okay? And there's nothing wrong with having other people serve our veterans that aren't necessarily a veterans hospital, okay? Second thing you have to do, very important, the money you get has to be spent intelligently, because the quickest way you can lose support is to have fraud. Someone stealing and billing the Department of Veterans Affairs for care they never gave anybody. And there's going to be a temptation. So the people who are responsible for going to the government and getting the money, setting up the budget and so forth, cannot be the people that are also the watchdogs. You have to separate it. Very important. It's also very important that logistics, otherwise known as supply chain, that you get the stuff to the hospital, the clinic, the doctor's office as absolutely, when it has to be there on time. Remember the old Purolator cargo ads, is that it's got to be there. Because the last thing you want is veterans traveling to a hospital or a clinic, and they get there and they say, oh, we don't have that medicine, or we don't have those kind of bandages, or we don't have this. Very, very important that you do logistics, and the secretary, whoever you appoint, make sure that person has the ability to say yes and nobody else. Just, he will then designate, you do logistics, you do finance, you do, looking at fraud and stuff, and make sure they have the authority to say yes. Because one of the things of the U.S. government is we're so terrified of making mistakes. We got 100,000 people, all of whom can say no, and 100,000 people, all of whom have to say yes. And so nothing ever gets solved in this, resolved in this country for good. We can have a vote in Congress, vote in the House, 10 years later, 5 years later, it comes up again and again and again and again. So we don't put anything to bed. And that's one of the reasons that, as someone who worked for 5 US senators, I love the Senate. But now it doesn't do anything. Because as soon as you vote on an issue, the folks that need a dragon to slay, as Congressman Norm Dix told me, immediately your vote becomes plastered all over the internet, and millions of dollars are raised against you and your fellow senators who voted a certain way. It doesn't matter how you vote. One side is going to look bad, and the other side is going to look. And the amount of money in this system now, and so everybody's scared. I'll vote to change the name of a post office. I don't want to offend anybody, but should we deal with real issues? I mean, give you one example, the immigration bill. It was a fascinating way of hooking up a locomotive on both ends of a train and going in opposite directions simultaneously. It said the bill goes into effect if there are 5,000 arrests per day on the border for 5 days. But go to the end of the bill. If 5,000 people are arrested every day for 5 days, the president must declare a humanitarian crisis, and that means the bill is suspended. So they rigged it. And that's what the Senate does. We have to vote simultaneously to do the opposite thing all at once. And you don't want to do that with respect to when Ukraine, you got so many issues. The war is being fought on your territory, not very much in Russia, because Putin keeps saying, well, if you come after me, I'm going to use nuclear weapons against you. And so, unfortunately, we have basically said we won't give Ukraine certain kinds of weapons that enable them to strike deep into the Russians. So when Ukraine does, we say, no, you really shouldn't do that. They went after oil refineries, and then we said, no, you shouldn't do that. Well, if there's one thing you want to do is take money away from the Russians and Moscow, for crying out loud, go after their oil. Now, the problem is, if America was doing what we did previously on oil production and gas production, we could make up the difference. For example, Texas alone supplied all of Europe's gas at the beginning of this war because they had extra gas, which saved Europeans bacon, okay? If we did that, rather than cutting back oil and gas production in this country and slowing down investment in the future, at the same time telling Ukraine, don't go after Russia's energy policy. Now, Steve Blank, who often speaks here, he and I have written a couple essays on this, is, again, the left hand is doing the opposite of what the right hand is doing. So you're not moving in the right direction on this, and the people who are suffering in Ukraine. If you want to take money away from Russia, for crying out loud, take money away from Russia. And 2/3 of their government revenue comes from oil and gas sales and oil and gas production. Well, if you need to go after that, go after that. We could make up the difference if we wanted to. But to go back, finally, on the Veterans Administration, let veterans go to any hospital, any clinic, any doctor in Ukraine, or if you want to set it up, if they go across the border to somebody else, pay for it. Give them the care. They desperately need that, and you want a system in which is very flexible. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we now have a slight change in the program. I understand that there will be a gentleman joining us online. Am I correct? Or
I think they're ready, yeah, because it was
Okay.
a technical issue and they have great.
okay, so this would be Mr. Vitaly Herzog. So that now I think we have the connection, and he's the head of the NGO Vilni Tavirny. Sorry for mispronouncing it. Is this coming up?
I think so.
All right, let's see what happens. If technology supports us or not. Okay. All right, sir, the floor is yours. We can see you.
Вас бачимо.
Добрий день, шановні
Wait,
колеги.
Okay, we got.
Мене добре чути? Мене чути? Дякую. Дозвольте мені, як
So
голові
allow me, please, as a head of NGO Vilni Tavirny Free and Faithful, I'd like to remind you our NGO is official lobbyist of Ukrainian veteran community in United States of America, we'd like to explain how we see our future work based on the strategy, how to build bridges policy on veterans in Ukraine and United States. But first of all, I'd like to tell you about our NGO and why we are gathered here today. Our organization was created in 2023, United Veterans and the protectors of our nation and volunteer supporters who care about the future of our nation. As we began our work in Ukraine, we focused on many issues of humanitarian nature. We wanted to support our military service personnel, veterans, and members of their families. And very soon we understood that humanitarian aid, though important, is not solving all the problems of veterans. We are not able to solve all wide problems that our military servicemen face. And so, very often, our combat brothers and sisters have come to us with many problems that were in responsibility of the government, but the government was not solving those problems. And we could see how fast our veteran community is growing and how exponentially their problems increase. So we need to find a systemic way of serving our veterans. If we don't solve their problems, they will be pushed off to margins and our nation would suffer a lot. So we need to analyze those problems and we need to form active position in developing veterans policy. Working together with our partners, we have done a lot of work. We have analyzed our legislation. We have discussed many failures of our legislation as it cannot meet today's challenges. We have also learned existing governmental policy to integrate and rehabilitate our veterans. We have monitored civilian initiatives. We looked at international support factors, and our conclusions were depressing. We understand that at a time of war, our nation will never have sufficient financial and human resources to help veterans. We also lack necessary experience to um, help the situation at large and to organize valid support to veterans. That's why we are addressing international community, specifically United States of America, because it is United States of America who have built wide and comprehensive veteran support, and they could serve as a roadmap to support Ukrainian veterans and to increase cooperation for that purpose. So I'm very thankful to everyone who joined discussing and developing this document. And as a result of this building bridges strategy, we have amended our NGOs development and will focus on working together with American partners to solve the problems of Ukrainian veterans. We need to start with advocacy of uh, legal drafts to build comprehensive legislation in Ukraine to protect social rights of veterans. Majority of veterans are looking forward to social justice. They don't need government guarantees and social benefits that are outdated because government has no money to implement those benefits. At the same time, similar benefits are given to people who have not deserved those benefits. Ukrainian legislation must ensure a return of veterans to active civil life, and we need to take American legislation as an example. So, building bridges strategy explains this in detail.
включення у ветеранську політику теми захисту прав ветеранів.
The policy, the topic of the veteran protection, which is now is neglected, almost neglected by the Ukrainian society and government of Ukraine. It's a tough topic which requires, specific attention and great attention with the wider public, but through strategy we build the bridges. And I think it's important not to lose time on, inventing recipes, but use implementing Ukrainian American experience that proved to be successful. The third priority is to establish efficient system of professional development. This component of veteran policy, in our opinion, is a key one when it comes to bring veterans into the full-fledged civil life, and also engaging their potential in rebuilding our country, developing economy, and restoring the economical democratic principles of political life, and as such, integration of the Ukraine into European domain. So U.S. experience will help to use the solidarity approach. I do hope that, but using the support of our American partners, we will manage to develop and implement the roadmap for Ukraine veterans. It would help them to plan their civil career before the retirement from the armed forces of Ukraine, and also develop the business strategy, and specifically in such industries as medical, construction, and defense. It will help veterans to effectively use their knowledge and experience that they have gained during the service with the armed forces of Ukraine. So I would like to reassure that we will never stop. And strategy is important to have a cooperation, and this cooperation has to be filled with the content. So through this cooperation, our veterans will be able to get back to civil life and make significant impact into development of their communities in the future of Ukraine. I'm sure that the recommendations has laid a foundation for development of the real and multi-vector and long-term cooperation between Ukraine and the United States of America. In veteran policy and veteran issues, I would like to thank all the participants of the conference, our partners in the United States of America, for supporting Ukraine. It's such a difficult times, and I do hope for mutual cooperation and your support, that we in the democratic countries, in the democratic world, could protect our country from the enemy and protect the entire democratic world, to prevent from happening what is happening right now in Ukraine. I'd like to thank every one of you. Glory to Ukraine.
Okay. Well, thank you. I am reminded, thank you so much for clarifying, obviously, all these important matters. Clearly, just if I can point at the obvious, in Ukraine, we're talking about veterans, but there's a war going on. So are these veterans, as in people who've done and never going to be called again into active duty? Who knows? There seems to be, from what we read, a penury, not enough people serving in the military, in the active military right now. So it's not like we had a war, it's over, and now let's take care of our veterans. The war is still on. And as we were reminded, veterans go back to places that show the devastation of the war ongoing. The bombings by the Russians continue, missile attacks, drone attacks, disruption of infrastructure and all that. That doesn't make it for an easy re-entering of civilian life. Somebody say, okay, I served my country, I'm done. Now I want a nice job in a comfortable place and rebuild my life and do things quietly. I don't think so. It's not possible because the war, unfortunately, is still ongoing. Again, I'm just pointing out at the obvious, but this is a fundamental difference between our U.S. Veterans Affairs experience and what, unfortunately, Ukraine is experiencing as we speak, and unfortunately, we don't know for how long. I think, yes, I'm reminded that a draft of the report is available for you, for everybody, for all the participants on the table. So again, I understand this is kind of work in progress, but it's a draft, and please help yourselves. I think in the next order, we've got Colleen. Yes, please. Floor is yours.
All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm Colleen Denny. I'm the Regional Director of Europe with the nonprofit Spirit of America. And want to thank Katerina and Irina and everyone who organized and brought everyone together here today. So I'm a Coast Guard veteran. I served just shy of 9 years in the U.S. Coast Guard. 6 of those years were at sea on Coast Guard cutters. And on 2 of those cutters, so for 4 years, I was the only female on board. So very much understand what it's like to serve and work in a space that is male-dominated and is male-centered, just like veterans associations and veterans fairs here in the United States and really globally are male-centered. So with my work at Spirit of America, I lead our team's efforts in Europe and, of course, in Ukraine. We've been active in Ukraine since 2015. If you've ever been in the country and dialed into Army FM, that is a project that Spirit of America started with the U.S. Embassy to combat Russian propaganda back in 2015. But fast forward to the last 2 years, have been working directly alongside deployed U.S. troops and U.S. diplomats to fill in the gaps for what the U.S. government, the aid that they cannot provide or cannot provide quickly enough. So this can range from body armor, helmets, medical gear, all the way to secure communications, vehicles to do medical evacuations, reconnaissance drones, everything that just can't arrive quickly enough or in the numbers that it needs to. But I wanted to focus my remarks today also as we look to the future of the eventual peace and victory of Ukraine. And as my colleagues pointed out, while there are about 1.2 million active duty service members in the armed forces of Ukraine right now, the Ministry of Veterans Affairs has assessed that that number could quadruple to 5 million veterans by the end of this war. So if we do some simple math, let's say about 15% of those service members are female, that will equate to 750,000 Ukrainian female service members that will be requiring veteran services after the war. And we have so many lessons learned here in the United States from our own Veterans Administration, but also specifically even from the last 10 or 12 years or so of when American women have been allowed to serve and fight in combat positions, first starting in Afghanistan with the cultural support teams. And we see common trends of the care that female veterans need, different medical services that they need service and care for, common traumas that they experience afterwards. And as we look at the 60,000 female service members that are serving in Ukraine right now, 5,000 to 10,000 of them are in combat zones on the front lines. And unfortunately, we've also learned from our own service that female combat veterans have the highest rate of incidence of military sexual trauma. And so looking forward, we have so much to do, not just here in the United States, but also with our Ukrainian partners, both in the government and, of course, civil society. We all know that civil society and nonprofits, non-governmental organizations move much faster than any government, and that's by design. So the advocacy and the networking and laying the groundwork and starting the work now for the eventual, as I always like to say, the eventual and for sure victory of Ukraine, we're already behind. So being here today is so wonderful to meet you all. I look forward to continuing the discussion with the colleagues up here and with all of you. And I'll pass it to my left.
Hi, thank you everyone for having me. My name is Dan White. Among other things, I'm a former Army officer and Afghanistan veteran. When I was thinking about coming to speak here, I thought to focus on what I know, and my wife and supervisor in the audience, they look concerned that this may be a short speech. But I want to start off by saying that everything that we are, everything that we will be is stored in one of two places. One is in the 3-pound network of cells that make up our brain, and the other is in the network of social connections that we have. And modern war, especially the type that we see in Ukraine, is uniquely terrible for both in terms of exposure to traumatic injuries to the brain and in terms of social displacement, potentially entire families uprooted for a long time, if not forever. So the first thing I wanted to highlight is that one of the most, I would say, underappreciated but most prevalent injuries that is going to come out of this war is severe traumatic brain injuries. About 3/4 of all casualties in Ukraine are the result of artillery fire, missile fire, so explosive weapons. And you can treat very serious injuries in terms of lacerations, fractures, all sorts of the damage that happens to your body. But the damage still remains in your brain. It's harder to tell exactly how that is treated. And I understand what this means. I was blown up in Afghanistan, suffered from that as well. And the effects are unpredictable and will last an entire person's lifetime. And it's something that the U.S. is trying to understand as well. So I think it's important that healthcare in Ukraine starts to keep tabs on blast exposures in particular, something that the U.S. is trying to do to create longitudinal studies of how exposure to different types of injuries and for how long and what severity cause what changes. And I think there's opportunity for collaboration with the U.S. on this in the future as well. The second is the importance of social connection. So meaningful social ties, meaningful social activity, that's what gives life its meaning. And we're going to find that this war, in terms of the number of people displaced, I think is something close to 9 million people have been displaced either internally or externally in Ukraine. And when we talk about veterans serving within the country, a lot of people, when they come out of uniform, may go back to places that they did not grow up, places that they don't have strong social connections. They're going to need to get reintegrated potentially into new communities. One of the things that we know is that, or studies have suggested, is that the rate of mental health issues tends to go up from active duty when a person becomes leaves active duty and either enters the reserve or becomes a veteran. So active duty tends to have lower rates of mental health, mental illness. Reservists have higher, and veterans tend to have somewhere around the same. So within that is just this idea that there is a buffering effect to having strong relationships that you have when you're in the military. And then when you lose that, if there's not something strong that replaces that, you potentially are at risk of developing mental illness at some point in life. So it's important to consider the ways in which people who are both come out of this war physically able and also severely wounded to have opportunities to participate in their community and to participate in meaningful recreation. So those are some things that I think we have learned with this present generation of veterans in the U.S., and there will be opportunities in Ukraine as well. Some veterans organizations to highlight that I think are worth noting that have come out of this generation of veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan are veterans that participate in community service organizations such as the Mission Continues, organizations that participate in disaster relief such as Team Rubicon, and organizations that bring together service members and civilians to participate in recreational activities such as Team Red, White, and Blue. So these are certain things that Ukraine should consider in the future, and one of the things that Ukraine is blessed with is having a strong civil society that can host these types of activities. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for giving your own, first-hand experience, obviously, and thanks for your service. Obviously, the nation is grateful. Although these wars didn't turn out to be probably what we hoped they would, but service was given, and a lot of sacrifice by you and all your colleagues and friends and those who fell and those who were wounded, and so thank you. I think we have now another participant joining us online from Ukraine. I don't know if the connection is ready right now. Okay, good. Thank you very much. And so we have Mr., forgive my mispronunciation, Oleski Ilyahenko, who has quite a bit of experience both in police service, peacekeeping operations, veteran himself of the Russian-Ukrainian War, and also having served in very important position as Deputy Minister of Veterans Affairs in Ukraine. He's got a PhD in criminology, among many other achievements. Thank you for being with us. The floor is yours. Thank you.
According to hundreds.
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
When we are talking about, okay, first of all, I would like to thank the United States for supporting us, and it's very important for us in this wartime and Russian aggression against Ukraine. When we are talking about medical and psychological aid, I would like to point out that maybe we have here two maybe main pillars of this problem. First of all, medical and psychological aid in general, and protection of the rights of soldiers and veterans in particular, because sometimes we don't understand our rights and our interests, and sometimes when we receive some services, we don't understand it was correct or not. For example, if a soldier was wounded and he is in an unconscious condition, he can't react, he can't control everything that will be how he can be treated in some minutes, in some maybe hours and days, and only his friends and his chiefs and medical personnel will do something to provide everything for this wounded person. And if in 1 or 2 months he will wake up and will understand, okay, my health is good, but I have no any documents to prove something, to maybe to prepare some documents for the status of the person with disabilities, and so on and so on. If we're wounded and we remain conscious, okay, I can control everything from the first step of my evacuation to the maybe my status of veteran and so on, because I agree with our previous partners who said that, okay, we need to understand the difference between general human rights and the rights of specific categories of person, members of military forces or women, service women, and so on and so on. Yeah, when I was wounded near Bakhmut in 2022, first, the medical aid I received from the Bakhmut City Hospital, and altogether then was evacuated by military bus to Dnipro City Hospital, then in 5 days by military special evacuation train to western part of Ukraine in one of the hospital found a small village, and then returned to Kiev to Veterans Hospital, regional Veterans Hospital, and altogether it was 4 hospitals. All of them are non-military hospitals, and I agree with some of my colleagues today that it must be cooperation between state authorities and private and local authorities. It's very important, really, because we don't have a lot of hospitals to provide all the services for all soldiers and for all military personnel. And in this situation, when we're talking about medical and psychological support, we have to understand that first step is the step from the evacuation from battlefield. But during the evacuation by bus between cities, somebody must accompany these soldiers, psychologists and medical personnel. We have it in Ukraine now. It's very difficult, but we have it, and especially when we were evacuated by train for maybe more than 1 day, maybe driving and so on. It's important to understand all these steps: hospitals, transportation between hospitals, transportation between region, and so on, and especially if we send somebody to foreign countries, because we need to provide some services for the time of this transportation and evacuation. Because altogether, I agree with you, dear colleagues, altogether will be the result of this action, and in future we will see it was correct or not, because I can return to civilian life and nobody will understand, okay, what happened with me maybe a month ago. But I said, okay, it happened that nobody helped me between these evacuation vehicles and transport and so on, because, okay, everything was okay in city hospital in Bakhmut and everything will be okay in Kiev hospital. But if I'll have 2 or 3 days of transportation, everything will happen with me, and I can be maybe twice injured because of some technical problems, and we have a lot of these cases in Ukraine and other countries. Nobody will prove, okay, your injury or wounds you receive in the battlefield, or maybe during this transportation on the territory of non-occupied Ukraine, and nobody help you. And I have to find witnesses from medical personnel, from other military personnel, to prove that I was injured during these services. And it's very important to respect all these rights. That's why in Ukraine, as you know, 2 weeks ago, the main Department of Protection of Rights of Military Personnel was created within the Ministry of Defense. And according to the action plan that was adopted by the Council of Europe for Ukraine for 2023-2026 resilience, recovery and reconstruction, we have separate program in this action plan of Council of Europe. It's called Protection of Rights of Military Personnel and Veterans and their families. And as you know, we have Ombudsman Office in Ukraine. We have our members of parliament and committee concerning social and veterans policy, and Ministry of Veterans Affairs. Altogether, we can choose the situation. We can solve all the problems. And only one thing I want to add once more. In this situation, I want to reiterate that only together with the state authorities and private NGOs, we can provide all the services. And every veteran, every members of fallen soldiers and servicemen and servicewomen will have an opportunity to choose better services, or from the side of state authorities or from the side of private authorities. It must be a choice, not something one direction. In this situation, we'll understand the relationships and the honesty relationship between country and private sector, and for the right of our people. That's why, thank you very much for this kind of meeting. I think that we will use it. We'll use all opportunities and to win this war against Russia. And thank you very much, United States, for this assistance. And I think we'll and other partners from Canada I can see here and from other countries. And I hope everything will be okay and we'll win together with you. Thank you very much.
I understand that our next speaker will also join us online, and that would be Mr. John Kilmer. Is he ready to be with us? Mr. Kilmer? Is he there? Do we know?
Hello? Can anyone hear me?
Yes, all right, well, good, sorry. We go back. So Mr. Kilmer is joining us online. He's a very impressive background and has worked extensively with various government organizations in the US and in Ukraine, particularly, as I see here in his bio, a director of the company. Kilmer worked with the Department of Veterans Affairs of the United States, the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, the Ministry of Internal Affairs, and the Ministry of Veterans Affairs of Ukraine. And Mr. Kilmer is the founder of Valicore US and one of the developers of artificial intelligence technology to detect PTSD, and he cooperates with the US Army. Welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Dobrobramski. My Ukrainian is not the best as it could be. I appreciate everyone's time today. First, I'd like to say, allow me to begin sharing with you a profound truth that resonates deeply with the mission of Valicore US. Our emotions shape the world around us. They influence our decisions, guide our actions, and define our interactions. But yet, too often, we overlook the power of emotional intelligence in navigating its complexities of our personal and professional lives. As the founder of Valicore US, I have witnessed firsthand the transformation and potential that lies at the intersection of emotional intelligence and technology. Our human emotional analysis technology, or HEAT, represents a paradigm shift in how we understand, harness the power of emotions. By providing real-time insights into our emotional states, HEAT empowers the individuals, the organizations, to make more informed decisions, fostering better communication, and drive higher levels of performance, human performance. But our commitment to advancing emotional intelligence extends beyond the realm of technology. We recognize that there are pressing societal challenges that deemed our attention and action. Among these challenges is the urgent need to address defined treatment, rehabilitation, and the social support of our war veterans. In Ukraine, as in many nations, veterans form a significant and active social group, as Mr. White mentioned. Groups whose contribution to society are invaluable. Yet all too often, their needs and experiences are overlooked or marginalized. This is why our initiatives like the upcoming Conference on Veterans Affairs is so crucial. This conference, born out of collaboration between Ukraine organizations, veterans, and our partners in the US, seeks to address the unique challenges faced by adapting them to the Ukrainian realities. We can develop strategies and plans that ensure our veterans receive the support they deserve. Furthermore, by fostering the cooperation between US and Ukraine, organizations We can evaluate the support framework for veterans and their families in Ukraine. This is not merely about adopting foreign practices and talking, but actually crafting a tailored approach that works, that provides the solution, and that meets the specific needs for the Ukrainian veterans, children, and people. It's not about the US, this is about Ukraine. It's not about me, it's about Ukraine. In conclusion, the journey towards a more emotionally intelligent society and a brighter future for our veterans is one that requires collaboration, innovation, and unwavering commitment. We can only do this together. So I ask you, let's embark on this journey with determination, compassion, knowing that your impact that we make today will shape the world for generations to come. I've seen the firsthand destruction of what PTSD can do. And I can tell you, Valacor US and our subsidiaries like Valacor Ukraine, we're ready to give our technology to Ukraine. So I tell the Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Veteran Affairs, and all the ministries that are here, I will give heat to Z-Man and Zelensky and Ukraine for 2 months. That's how much I believe in it. Because I'm not here to talk, I'm here to take action. Our veterans, our children, they're dying while we're here talking. So I'd like to extend my hand to the Ukrainian people and our technology to the Ukrainian people. Foreign policymakers, NGOs, and governors, I want to work with you. We want to work with you. Yuri, our general manager, is here in Kiev right now. We are not leaving, and we are fighting with you guys in the trenches. And I'm going to stay right here with you guys until you guys receive the treatment that you deserve and earn. Thank you. Chukuyu.
Thank you so much for this very valuable insight on the importance, obviously, of psychological care and how devastating, reminding everybody how PTSD can be difficult to detect, difficult to treat, and what suffering it brings to people who have served and experienced it, traumatic experiences on the front. I believe next in line we have, and again joining us again online, is Dr. Megan Mobbs. Are you with us, Dr. Mobbs?
I'm here. Can you all hear me?
Yes, so we can see you and we can hear you, and you come to us with an incredibly vast and impressive background. As I read here, experienced non-governmental and public policy leader, graduate of the United States Military Academy, West Point. She holds a master in forensic psychology from George Washington University here in Washington, D.C., and a doctorate in clinical psychology from Columbia University. A Tillman Scholar and George W. Bush Veteran Leadership Scholar, she previously served as a presidential appointee to the United States Military Academy, West Point Board of Visitors, and is a gubernatorial appointee to the Virginia Military Institute Board of Visitors. The president of the R.T. Weatherman Foundation, she leads efforts to repatriate fallen Americans who die in service to Ukraine, and the Movement of Wounded in Action, WIA, abroad for specialty care. As a humanitarian, she's chartered relationships with the US government, multinational governments, legacy non-governmental organizations, and donors to project American values around the world. An extremely impressive background, a wealth of experience. Megan, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction. It's a pleasure to be here with you all today. I only wish we could be together in person. I'm extremely grateful to the organizers of this event for bringing together such incredible experts across a variety of spheres. A special thanks to Katerina and Irina for their leadership on this critical topic. So my name is Dr. Megan Mobbs, and I do currently serve as the president of the R.T. Weatherman Foundation, which is a US-based private operating nonprofit that has been doing work in Ukraine since March of 2022 following the full-scale invasion. Our two core programs, as were mentioned, predominantly focus on assisting American families whose loved ones have been killed in action in Ukraine and evacuating wounded in action service members in cooperation with our Department of Defense to our Tier 2 hospital in Ramstein, Germany. To date, we've evacuated dozens of wounded in action service members of the Ukrainian Armed Forces from 12 different countries. And I actually just returned from my 13th trip to Ukraine last week. While this work is extremely impactful and critical, the focus of my remarks today are derived from my experience as a US combat veteran who led a unit in Afghanistan, a former paratrooper, the daughter of 2 US veterans, and a clinical psychologist who studied and researched under George Bonanno, a world-renowned expert on trauma, and who did my clinical internship in our Veterans Affairs system here in the US. Taking a look at the biographies of others who are speaking today and just sitting and hearing all of the wealth of expertise and knowledge, I do anticipate others are going to predominantly focus on post-traumatic stress disorder, moral injury, and trauma-related injuries such as TBI, as Dan just mentioned a moment ago. Given that, I think it's imperative that I speak on my research at Columbia and what it demonstrated with regard to distress in the American veteran space. In the seminal article that we posted together, myself and Dr. George Bonanno, it was entitled Beyond War and PTSD, the Crucial Role of Transition Stress in the Lives of Military Veterans. And what we discussed and what we found is that while only a relatively small minority of military veterans develop post-traumatic stress disorder, and again, this is with US veterans, American veterans, understanding this war in Ukraine is vastly different. But what we have found here in the US is that mental health theory and research with military veterans has predominantly focused on trauma-focused conditions, so post-traumatic stress disorder and its treatments. But by contrast, many American veterans, and by some accounts, most American veterans experience high levels of what we will call transition stress during the transition out of uniform and back into their civilian life. And so think of transition stress as a clinical sounding diagnosis for the sense of alienation many veterans feel after they leave the military or military service. And transition stress can encompass a number of issues facing transitioning military veterans, and this can then lead to other conditions like anxiety, depression, and other behavioral difficulties. But predominantly, this includes a loss of purpose, a loss of sense of identity, and difficulties securing employment, conflicted relationships with family and friends, and just broadly other general challenges related to adapting to post-military life. But really, it is that first portion, that loss of identity, that is critical to understand. And it's not as simple as missing kind of the adrenaline-filled highs of wartime service, though that can certainly be a factor, but more commonly, it's a nostalgic longing for the sense of place and self and a sense of purpose that many within the military feel. Dan actually touched upon the necessity of social connection, and this is right. So there's a phrase that many people hear called being lonely in a crowd. So this is an experience many veterans feel. Loneliness is in fact a cognitive state, meaning it's an interpretation of the interpersonal connections in our daily lives. So it's not the amount of people we encounter, it's not the amount of people that we surround ourselves with, it is the quality and the interpretation of that social connection that ends up mattering the most. And for veterans who feel alienated or feel as though people around them don't understand their experience, don't understand what they saw on the front lines, that sense of loneliness can be quite pervasive and quite profound. So my recommendation to all of those looking at how to best serve veterans returning from the front lines of Ukraine is to expand past a narrow focus on what obviously we want to address the traumatic impact of war for those who develop post-traumatic stress disorder or other trauma-related conditions. Obviously, we recognize the insidiousness and the necessity of treating those, but it's to expand past a sole focus on that and look at reintegration and transition stress as being at times more pernicious and more prevalent within the veteran space. Because as we know, transition stress in American veterans has been found to predict both treatment seeking, so seeking out care, and then the later development of more pernicious mental health and physical health problems, including suicidal ideation. And Dan just mentioned this as well. The majority of first suicide attempts by veterans occur after military separation. It does not occur when they're in uniform. And some of the most effective interventions have not been clinical. It's been a mentor-based approach, with mentors assigned to veterans as they leave the military to just help with the daily things of life and understand the transition process. Because again, some of the most difficult things are reintegrating with family and friends and then managing those relationships holistically. There's been a tendency in our VA system to use the treatment of PTSD and the diagnosis of PTSD as a catch-all. And unfortunately, this obscures and prevents comprehensive one-size-fits-one treatment. Trauma is only one piece of a complex puzzle that must be addressed. Reintegration and transition is going to be crucial for societal stability in Ukraine and broad veteran well-being. And so the development of programs and policies concerning how to effectively fold veterans back into the civilian world in Ukraine must begin now in order to prevent, unfortunately, what we're seeing in our society, which is programming that hasn't been developed and is being developed after we recognized that that transition was a critical portion of veteran well-being. So again, thank you all for your time today. I will drop the paper Beyond War and PTSD in the chat so everyone has access to it. And I am so grateful to be here and working with all of you to make sure that Ukraine better treats its veterans and provides the services and policies that they need. Thank you.
We have a follow-on here. This is a very long panel. We have still a few more speakers. So may I ask I guess those who are sitting here to go back and join and hear, the other speakers that are, let's call it phase 2 of panel 1, Mr. Josh, and then Major Edward Echohawk, please to join us here. And also, we have joining us here, Christy Arnell. Is she here? Christy, please. Appreciate that. Thank you. And we are also going to have is he here? Yeah, but we're not. So we also have Dr. John Manning, and we also have, who's here? Is John Manning here? Thank you. Yes. Thank you. And also Christy Arnett. Yeah, we got her. And online, we got Valeria Voloshina, who will join us online later. So, well, thank you. Again, sorry about this logistics. Obviously, it's a very important topic, so there are so many speakers. Why don't we start, in this order here, from in descending order, and then we'll have our participant online. I guess we'll talk last. Please, the floor is yours.
All right. Hey, thank you all for letting me come up here. I'm honored to be here, and I think that what's going on today is pretty fantastic and absolutely necessary. I'm Major Edward Echohawk. I'm currently an active duty Army officer. Everything I'm going to talk about is based on my experience, not representing the U.S. Army, Department of Defense, or U.S. government. So we've talked a lot about PTSD and a lot about trauma, and I enlisted as a scout in 2004, did 2 deployments to Iraq, got to be a part of one of the 15-month deployments where my unit got picked up by JSOC. And our job was, unofficially, we basically hunted Al-Qaeda on blacked out helicopters for 10 months. The PTSD, the trauma, the anxiety that comes out of combat is incredibly significant. But like Dr. Mob said, it's different for everybody. Some people are more resilient, and that's not a slight to those that aren't. But it's the kind of thing that we have to recognize that it's a cultural piece, and overcoming the stigma is huge. So we can have the most impressive, amazing behavioral health programs, but if you can't convince that soldier who's dealing with a lot to go, then they don't do any good, right? So we have to understand how to talk to our soldiers, how to talk to our war fighters about that, and help them understand that it's not a sign of weakness. If you believe your archetype is you're a defender, you're a war fighter, you're there to protect your family and your country, then the next step in that is making sure that you stay mentally healthy so that you can continue to protect them, even at home. And I think that is the part that I would like to drive home is how do we have that conversation? And for me, it came down to having a conversation with somebody talking about my why. I said, I went to Iraq to defend my country, protect my family. And when I came home and I started dealing with home life and financial problems and problems at home, and it began to compound. I became the kind of person my wife and my kids didn't want to be around. And so I was no longer the protector. I became sort of the problem. And it wasn't until I started going and seeing a therapist and talking through the problems and getting that out there and really kind of working through that I started to understand the importance of it. And I would say that, you know, I think that there's a lot of value in commiseration through, you know, sitting down and talking to people that have been there. So, you know, you've been, I've been, we can talk through that. But there's a difference between talking to somebody who has a shared experience and talking to somebody who understands the psychological effects of that experience. And I think that's why what we're doing is so important, but overcoming that stigma of behavioral health, asking for help, that's a point of weakness. And that's a drumbeat that I will beat for the rest of my life. You know, when you're a warfighter and you come back, it is not a sign of weakness to get help. It is a sign of strength because you have to overcome that to continue to be able to protect and serve. And the reason it matters here is because Ukraine is eventually this thing is going to come to an end, hopefully sooner rather than later. And when it does, you're going to have a lot of warfighters coming home, and some of them are going to have these problems. And when they do, they're going to need that opportunity, and they're going to need that understanding to recognize how to get help, to become productive members of society, and to become the husbands and wives and the mothers and fathers they were and want to be again. So that's my 2 cents.
Well, thank you so much, and again, thanks for your service. This is not. I guess I can't picture myself on a helicopter hunting, you know, terrorists in Iraq. Thank you for your service. Josh, I guess you're next. Thank you.
Hey everyone, thank you for having me here today, and I apologize for reading this, but for the sake of time, and anyone that's worked with me before knows that I have a hard time staying on topic and not diving down rabbit holes. So the consequences of war and its trauma do not fade with time. The impact can reverberate for years, decades, and even generations, affecting the physical, mental, and emotional well-being of veterans, their families, and the populations of post-war nation. Therefore, we must develop and implement solutions that aim to prevent or mitigate the expansion of these consequences and their casualties. It is imperative to extend our support beyond the immediate aftermath of conflict and accompany Ukraine to victory and beyond. This involves creating and implementing robust long-term strategies for medical and psychological care, tailored to the unique needs of the ongoing conflict in a post-war Ukraine. These strategies should leverage existing programs, efforts, and technologies utilizing the experience from experts, established organizations, and supportive nations. Now is the time to act, preventing, treating, and preparing the environment that will shape the future of Ukraine and the free world. Although much can be discussed regarding prevention, such as how providing Ukraine and its heroes with solutions that enhance operational proficiency and survivability may prevent loss of life and physical injury, and lessen the psychological impacts of war. But with REACH having a core focus on human and systems performance and data teaming, I'd like to discuss how I see data playing a key role in the development, implementation, support, and continuous improvement of post-war strategies. Abacus is a conceptual method of utilizing existing systems and technologies to create a strategic data nexus. Although initially designed to enhance operational reach and effectiveness, it can be utilized to implement and support strategies for medical and psychological care. Within this strategic data nexus, imagine, if you will, a digital twin of the globe or nation and a convergence of a synthetic representation of the physical, the human, and the information. Abacus utilizes what is known as the Maven Bridge to bridge the physical, the human, and system, and the synthetic, data, artificial intelligence, and machine learning, to shape and prepare the environment and generate strategic impact. The conceptual design leverages an existing Ukraine Common Operating Picture and Situational Awareness Program, which provides Ukrainian commanders with real-time battlefield intelligence. The program aids in the military decision-making process to develop a course of action, to plan and execute those shaping and decisive operations, to reach a commander's desired end states. I believe that using the Abacus concept and leveraging the existing Ukrainian programs, both military and civilian, such as DIA, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, DIA, D-I-I-A, civilian passport, application? DIA. Live UA map, there are count hierarchies and historical data. This data could be utilized to converge physical events in time and information from throughout the conflict, creating a geolocated impact matrix that projects and depicts potential impact to an individual in relation to the consequences and trauma of war. This could provide Ukraine, supportive nations, organizations, and medical professionals with the necessary tools to implement long-term strategies to meet the current and ever-evolving post-war needs. In terms of Ukraine's service members and veterans, with appropriate security measures regarding service data, their unit's operational history, and other reporting metrics, real-time and historical, let's say a version of Abacus is implemented. Example of it in action could be an active service member returning from the front line with the individual entering their rest and recovery phase of the operant cycle. Healthcare providers and resources could be allocated to receive the individual or unit and be prepared to begin, continue, or refine a treatment plan based on the insights from the individual's impact matrix. The same method can be utilized to develop and implement a treatment plan for Ukraine's veterans. The Abacus could provide a structure to assist supportive elements in the planning, coordination, and allocation of medical professionals and resources. It also presents the opportunity for a continuous improvement model by monitoring the performance of both provider and patient, which simultaneously provides Ukraine with a platform to identify and mitigate corruption regarding to long-term post-war strategies. Through this, resource and performance monitoring, expanding to a bigger picture, an Abacus could be used to provide an understanding or to justify a need within Ukraine or to the international community. In conclusion, I feel that data will play a key role in creating and implementing a robust long-term strategy for medical and psychological care. In meeting the unique needs of an ongoing conflict in a post-war Ukraine, as the consequences of war and its traumas do not fade with time, we must come together to extend our support of Ukraine in providing care under fire to victory and beyond. God bless.
Well, thank you. I'm sorry, it was remiss in not giving you a proper introduction before, and you did not do that by yourself. So my apologies. So for everybody to know that our speaker has a pretty impressive background, having established an organization, Reach Tactical, and which has been working actively, right, with in civil and military affairs and trying to integrate these various aspects of civilian life and tactical training and civilian defense, humanitarian sector, and so trying to work with all these aspects and trying to tie the loose ends, so to speak. Thank you very much. So we have, moving right along, we've got Christy Arnell, and just a quick introduction, who is the founder and president of the NGO Ukraine Unlimited, an organization that started with a mission to support Ukrainian individuals, especially women, by helping them find buyers for their handmade products and other goods to supplement their family incomes. This initiative was launched in April 2017, that is before the war, aimed at alleviating financial challenges in Ukraine's struggling economy. When the war in Ukraine began, as we all know, in February 2022, Ukraine Unlimited adapted its mission to focus on collecting donations to aid individuals and families in moving to safer locations during the bombings and other dangerous situations in their neighborhoods and cities. This phase, while ongoing, is now gradually shifting its focus. I mean, we all know what's going on, what's been going on for years. You know, internally displaced people, refugees, people who had to go to other countries, and people doing their best to survive in cities that are constantly under Russian bombing. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Yes, thank you for that introduction. And yeah, I am the founder and president of Ukraine Unlimited, and we are continuing our mission and shifting and changing because of the needs there. We did start it was actually 2000, I think it's wrong on my internet or the website, but it's 2016 that we started our organization. And then when the war began, we started helping with the displaced Ukrainians within Ukraine with basics of food, clothing, shelter, things like that. And then as the war has gone on, and we also were helping with the military as well from the very beginning. We've formed our team within Ukraine with the Ukrainians there that we're helping with these efforts, and also part of our team is in the military full time. And so we were helping with getting supplies to them, as many of you have mentioned before, with all of those needs that are constantly ongoing, and we're working on getting those even now. And we're continuing to work with the displaced people of Ukraine, and we're also continuing to help with the military with the supplies that are needed. But our latest project, as we're moving forward, we're working on renovating a building and for physical and mental rehabilitation. And part of the facility will have equipment and physical therapists there to help with severely injured soldiers and veterans with loss of limbs and other injuries that require physical therapy. And the other part will be for psychologists to be available for various types of therapies, such as the one-on-one sessions, group therapy, music therapy, art therapy, outdoor adventure therapy, like hikes in the Carpathian Mountains that Mountain Seed Foundation offer, hypnotherapy, and cognitive behavioral conjoint therapy, and also eye movement desensitization reprocessing, which is EMDR, and so many others. And the reasoning behind having both the physical and mental therapy combined in the one facility is to make it easier for intake with soldiers who might not otherwise want to go to a separate facility for mental care, but would already be there for physical therapy. And we're in the beginning phases of our creating the facility and would need funding from various places, such as government agencies, grants and donations, to make this a reality for us. So we are connecting with physical therapists and psychologists who are ready to help, and we have all of the physical therapy and rehabilitation equipment ready to be donated by another organization out of Ireland, actually, to our facility. But since we're starting this project, we need to have funding for our building renovation and overhead costs of running it. And we would like to connect with those here to be able to get some guidance in our process and make sure that we're doing this the way that would be best for the people of Ukraine, the veterans and soldiers there. I also wanted to add to our discussion by focusing on one specific type of mental therapy we would like to use at our facility, and that's the EMDR therapy. This is therapy that was pioneered in the U.S. By Francine Shapiro in 1989, and originally used with veterans who had PTSD with great success. And after some time, therapists became certified and began using that in the public sector. And also with success. And this type of therapy is being used in Ukraine since the beginning of the war, with soldiers coming off the front line with PTSD and needing to return to the front line or to civilian life. And I have invited a psychologist, Valeria Voloshyna, to speak to us specifically about their program that they have there in Ukraine, Reconstruction during the war. Run by Josef Zisels, who is busy today with the intake of several new soldiers coming directly from the front line with PTSD, or else he would have been here himself on the meeting. His project has over 10 mental health facilities in Western Ukraine, with over 200 psychologists, and 20% are certified in EMDR, where this type of therapy is being used. They use many other types of therapy, not just EMDR, but I asked her to kind of focus a little bit on that and touch a little bit on the other therapies that are being used at their facilities there, and the successes that they've had with their patients there. Also, just a connection really quick before I turn time over to Valeria, to connect all of this with the Ukrainian Veterans Affairs policy, we would like to see organizations like ours be supported in these efforts, and like they here are in the U.S., and these types of therapies being available to the veterans through the Ukrainian government. In the U.S., we have veterans hospitals that provide medical care, physical therapy, and mental therapy, mental health care and therapies, including EMDR and other therapies. And we would, at no cost to the veterans, and we would like to have those implemented for Ukraine, the veterans there. So I'm going to turn the time over to Valeria, if you can have her online on Zoom.
Okay, so this is our speaker online, and then we will have Dr.
Yes, and Valeria is a psychologist there in Ukraine, in Western Ukraine, at one of these facilities, and she should be there.
Yeah,
on Zoom.
I can see her.
Okay.
Valeria, are you with us? Can you hear us?
Yeah. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, very quickly.
Yes.
Valeria, as you know, her colleague just explained, is a psychologist in the project Recovery During the War from VAAD, Psychological Rehabilitation of Prisoners of War and Psychological Rehabilitation of Military Personnel. PE, Private Psychological Practice, teaching at the Online Academy, Academy of Deep Transformations, training students in the direction, specialist in working with the subconscious. Thank you for joining us. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon from Ukraine. I will speak Ukrainian. You said me that I can speak Ukrainian and you will translate. Окей, вітаю. Я буду розмовляти сьогодні українською мовою. Мене звати Валерія. Я практик, я психотерапевт, я психолог, я гіпнолог. І також я на сьогоднішній день аспірантка Криворізького державного педагогічного університету. На сьогоднішній день я працюю з військовими, з вдовами військових, полоненими та їх сім'ями. Я працюю в проєкті відновлення під час війни, засновником якого є Йозеф Зісельс. У цьому проєкті задіяно понад 150 психологів, і нам вдалося допомогти вже сотням людей. І цього б не було, якби не фінансова допомога небайдужих людей з вашої країни цьому всесвіту. Велика вам подяка. Але війна триває, тому фокус у світі потихеньку зміщується, і ми теж, на жаль, це відчуваємо. Але людей, яким потрібна допомога, стає все більше і більше.
And the number of people requiring help, this number continues to grow as the war continues. I will try to be brief, and organizers asked me to share successful stories. There are many things I could share, but today I'd like to present the program of psychological rehabilitation of military personnel as we work with veterans and POWs. We studied experience of many countries, but nobody has suffered what Ukraine is suffering today. We're talking about veterans, but our war is ongoing, and we can learn from experience of American care for veterans, and we need to continue learning as we rehabilitate soldiers who fought in the war and now cannot fight in the war, but many of them want to come back to the front line we call the zero line, and we need to help them. People are burning psychologically out. They have PTSD, depressions, anxiety, behavioral and emotional deviations, and many other cases that are caused by trauma, whether physical or emotional, or both. But our soldiers want to come back, and so we want to help them restore and go back. We have chosen Ukrainian Carpathian Mountains as a rehabilitation center, a rehabilitation area. And I'm now working with soldiers that have been returned from the Russian prisons. And in addition to group therapy and individual therapy and art therapy, we also hike in the mountains. That is very helpful. As soldiers come to us, so they get through the screening to assess their physical and emotional states, to evaluate depression level, depression, anxiety, alcohol, drug addiction, PTSD. And we have not mentioned this so far, but we have huge problem of alcohol and drug use among our soldiers and veterans, and this is a huge challenge. So based on the data we receive, we try to help based on our methodology toolbox. This is a set of effective methods to work with
I'm
different
reminded
states.
that we need to hurry a little bit because we're a little bit beyond our time. So if we can just conclude kindly, because we don't have time for a longer presentation. Is that okay?
Ці техніки EMDR,
These techniques include of Gestalt therapy and art therapy. And EIMDR method was mentioned already at this conference. We use it for individual help to trauma patients when patients are overwhelmed with emotions, with trauma. We try to help them by describing this event through visualization, through eye movement exercises. This helps overcoming trauma experience, to analyze it and to move it from trauma to life experience. Peculiarity of our program is inflexibility of methods we use, and we have done a lot of research to show efficiencies of our methods. So organizers of the conference asked to bring successful case. So I'd like to tell this case story. We have received recently 22
As we're out of time.
veterans.
Sorry, can we have to, we're sorry to give this hard stop, but I am informed that we're out of time. My apologies. There's no time to continue. Thank you very much for your contribution and for describing what is actually being done. Yes, she can send, the organizers inform me that you can submit the cases that are really important for people to understand what's actually happening on the ground via email. So thank you very much. Appreciate your contribution and joining us from Ukraine. And now we have Dr. Manning, who is really, on the U.S. side of things, who's actually talking, who can talk to us a little bit about what actually has been done in terms of the supply of care, given his very extensive background. He earned his PhD in clinical and forensic psychology from Sam Houston State University in 2017 and completed internship and postdoctoral training at San Antonio Military Medical Center in San Antonio, Texas, as an active duty Army officer in 2018. He was, most importantly, assigned as 1st Brigade 25th Infantry Division Behavioral Health Officer from 2019 to 2022, where he deployed to Iraq in support of Operation Inherent Resolve. In 2019, 2020, he was assigned to Fort
важливі
Belvoir.
результати. Потім він працював в Форт Белуар як операційний психолог. Доктор Меннінг
for PTSD. We talked about this a lot today. Personnel assessments and selection, executive consultation, and statistical analysis in psychological assessment applications. So he can give us a perspective from the side of the caregivers. We heard a lot from those who need the care and what kind of care they may need. He can tell us about his experience as a caregiver. Thank you, Doctor.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to
And I'm
be
sorry, I have to ask you to be brief. It's not fair because you're the last one.
Understood,
But I'm told
and I
that we are
appreciate it.
really behind with our program. So do your best. Thank you, sir.
Will do. Good morning. My name is Major John Manning. I'm currently active duty Army psychologist. And my experiences are just that. My experiences, I don't represent the government or the military or the Army. I've had the opportunity to be a psychologist in the Army, working with people both currently in and as they're transitioning, and in a previous life, working with veterans who had transitioned out of the military. Given the time constraints, I want to hit on three main areas that I think are extremely critical. One, I see the system in a triangle with three vertices. One is the veteran, right? The second are the providers, and the third is the role of the state in setting up the infrastructure to connect the veteran and the provider, connect those that need the care and those that can provide the care. And there has to be a connecting function there. And I see the role of the state in doing that here in the United States. The Veterans Administration is that connective tissue. But there are friction points, there are barriers. One of the barriers is we look at veteran culture, as Major Echohawk noted. In the US, we have a saying, if you build it, they will come. That's not always true. One of the hallmarks of PTSD is avoidance. Avoidance maintains and continues the symptom experience in PTSD. We run away from it, and that might look like drug abuse. It might look like behavioral avoidance. It might look like alcohol abuse. Some way to numb and forget the memories of the things that happened, the traumatic experiences. How do we get around that? One of the best things, and as a junior enlisted soldier myself, a long time ago, one of my leaders normalized seeking support. Absolutely critical. It needs to start now. That culturally, socially, there has to be a normalization that seeking help is not just okay, because that's permissive, it's encouraged. It's the normal thing to do. Incredibly important. There has to be a trust that one, is going to be okay for me to seek support. Number two, the other point of friction is we have to treat effectively. If we look at research, literature, it's highly nuanced, but there are specific treatments that have been research proven, not proven, supported to be effective. And it sounds like that is already underway. It sounds like there's already a large network, very encouraging. That's exactly what must happen. But we've got to be able to connect the veterans with providers, with the help. And that's money, that's space, that's time, that's putting clinics, treatment facilities where veterans can access them. Otherwise, there are so many more barriers to that. Transition, as noted earlier, is an incredibly difficult thing for some. How do we smooth that? Let's look at the friction points in the system and then work to minimize those. Thank you.
Well, that was succinct. Thank you very much. And I think what I got out of this is there's no shame in looking for care, and understand that it's okay, and that people who will take care of you are understanding and sympathetic and can help. And please go and seek help. But on the other hand, the help has to be supplied where the people are. And as you said, here's the triangle. So thank you very much to all our speakers, both here, physically here, and online. This has been a long but fascinating panel that provided a kind of an overview of the problem in Ukraine and what Americans can contribute. I think by now we're going to take a break.
General Petraeus, welcome to Kiev. Thank you for all the work you're doing on behalf of Ukraine and building the relationship between Ukrainian defense, military, national security community the American one. And also, sir, I'd like to thank you for supporting the Borderlands Foundation, joining
Privilege.
the
All
US
this is a
Ukraine,
privilege.
US-Ukraine Veterans Charity Golf Tournament. And really looking forward to seeing you there in Washington, D.C. at Andrews Air Force Base.
Oh, it's going to be great. Thanks for the initiative you've demonstrated in doing this. My commendation to you on Borderlands and what you're trying to do with that to make sure that what the heroes have done is never lost. And thanks for pulling together what's going to be a very special day at Andrews Air Force Base Golf Course.
Yes, sir. And it's going to be
not that I golf, of course. But
no, sir. We're going to be on the there's non-golfing tickets. We're going to be on the non-golfing track, drinking in the clubhouse, and talking to Ukraine's heroes. That's going to be the main thing, is showing them America and our hospitality.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you, sir. It's Sam Cook here. I'm with Lieutenant General retired Frank Helmick, who, sir, you were the deputy for General Petraeus how many times?
Well, I worked directly for General Petraeus 3 times in a 37-year span. So it was a wonderful learning experience, a great leader, great mentor, and a tremendous asset to the United States, not only to our Army, but to the United States.
And sir, you're still friends with him. I mean,
absolutely.
So it's a good long-term mentor, and great to have him in at the golf tournament with us. Why are you coming to the golf tournament, sir?
Well, look, I really believe in what you're doing, Sam, to try to help the Ukrainian military and those affected with PTSD. That is the one injury, the one wound that is invisible to everybody around that person. We don't know how that impacts that individual, the people that he's with or she's with in their community. So this effort that you have to raise money to help those in Ukraine with PTSD, to treat those in Ukraine with PTSD, is a worthy cause. And that's why I'm going to the golf tournament.
And you get to hang out with General Petraeus again, right, sir?
That's perfect. I will be able to carry his bags of golf clubs, yes.
Well, sir, you made 3-star general, last corps commander in Iraq, commander of the 18th Airborne Corps, the best fighting formation in the U.S. Army. So you have a few things. A lot of people are going to want to meet you. And sir, what I'm most excited about, we're in Kiev. You met a lot of Ukrainians, is introducing to American warriors the two best warrior communities in the world, Ukrainian and Americans. How do you think that's going to go?
I think it's going to go wonderful. It's a great matchup. It's great to have the warriors from Ukraine come to the United States, and hopefully we will also have some great participation at the tournament. So I'm looking forward to the effort.
I hope some of those 18th Airborne troopers sign up based on this, sir. All right, sir.
I hope so too. Thank you very much.
See you there.
Looking forward to seeing you.
On June 7th, in the heart of Washington, D.C., on the storied greens of Andrews Air Force Base, be part of history at the inaugural U.S.-Ukraine Veterans Charity Golf Tournament, an event where valor, history, and the spirit of golf come together. Here, the stories of resilience take center stage. Ukrainian veterans who have fought fearlessly on the front lines for freedom now stand with us on the green, finding common cause with our veterans in the United States. Meet Ukrainian heroes whose bravery in battle is matched only by their passion for continuing to live life. Hear their stories, witness their unwavering spirit, and share a round of golf that goes beyond the game. This isn't just a tournament, it's a gathering of hearts and heroes. On June 7th at the Andrews Air Force Base, where past presidents have played and where today's heroes receive our salute, amidst the lush fairways and pristine greens, you'll not only play alongside these brave souls, but also contribute to a noble cause. Every registration, every swing supports the Borderlands Foundation mission to ensure that the stories of Ukraine's heroes are forever etched in history. Your participation aids vital PTSD research and treatment of Ukrainian veterans and the establishment of a historical research center in Ukraine, staffed by their veterans, honoring and creating their legacy. And with General David Petraeus as our guest of honor, along with the Ukrainian parliament members and business leaders, the tournament promises to be a place where the warrior, political, and business classes of the two bravest and strongest countries in the world forge bonds for a lifetime. If you care about Ukraine's heroes and honoring their defense of the free world, join us at the U.S.-Ukraine Veterans Charity Golf Tournament. Whether you're a scratch golfer or you just want to attend to meet Ukraine's heroes in the clubhouse as a non-player, or you have a company or a nonprofit that wants to sponsor the event, click on the link below this video to get the information. We can't wait to see you in Washington, D.C. on 7 June, where your swing could make all the difference for Ukraine's war heroes.
My name is Sam Cook, and I'm the founder and executive director of Borderlands Foundation. A lot of you were out on the tour that I had the privilege of giving yesterday on the battles of Irpin and Bucha. I grew up studying history. My father was a history teacher. That's how I got attention as the third out of 5 children, was reading history and impressing them with it. So I've been passionate about it my whole life and been living in Ukraine since 2018, because when I went to master's school, graduate school to study history, my master's thesis was on Crimea and under Catherine the Great and the conquest of southern Ukraine by the Russian Empire. So when the war started, I did what all of us did. I tried to get involved, and my unique contribution, I believe, to this fight is the storytelling around the fight for future generations and making sure that the stories of the heroes are never forgotten. Our mission at the Borderlands Foundation is make sure Ukraine's heroes are never forgotten. And with those memories comes costs, which is the trauma that those memories cause. So we're raising money right now for PTSD treatment, research, treatment, and advocacy in Ukraine. We're trying to build that bridge to the American veterans community. June 7th in Washington, D.C., we're having a fundraiser at Andrews Air Force Base. Our guest of honor will be General Retired David Petraeus, who's here with us. He'll be at the VIP cocktail reception with our heroes that we're bringing over from Ukraine and the VIP guests, and then he'll be on stage with me at the awards gala, where we're going to talk about the bond between the U.S. and Ukraine veterans community that has already developed and we want to keep developing over the years. This will be an annual fundraiser event that we want to do in the U.S. and when peace comes in Ukraine. So if you're interested in hearing about it, you can go to our website at golf.borderlands.com.ua, or you can, if you're sitting here in the room, please talk to my team in the back and get information. If you can't come, you can still donate. We'd love to get in touch with you. So thank you very much.
By the way, Sam, thanks for talking about what you're going to do at Andrews Air Force Base. I look forward to it. It's going to be a great deal of fun and wonderful to foster the bonds between the Ukrainian and American veterans.
Yesterday, we had an opportunity to go see many pictures that we saw online, but in real life. So Bucha and Irpin, everyone I think has seen the videos and imagery of what happened there, but to actually walk on the ground was a very different experience. Even 2 years afterwards, you still see fences that have been blown apart with shrapnel, buildings that are still under construction, and that is after a huge rebuilding effect. So the fact you see kids walking down the street, or if they're walking by, this type of debris and this type of scarring is it definitely makes you think about what this war is about and the importance of resolve, and saw firsthand how it's been a rallying call about what does freedom mean and what does democracy mean in the world. And hopefully it's a very painful symbol, but a very, very strong symbol about what does that resolve mean for independence.
It was actually a moving experience in the sense that to get to see where the front lines were and hear about the heroics of the people, see where, I guess, a massacre occurred, and probably the most, I think, moving thing for me on the tour was when we went to the church and they had the graves of the mausoleums of the people that got killed or got massacred. This little old lady, a grandmother, came up, asked where we were from, told her we were Americans. She then proceeded to tell us how bad the Russians were and that the Ukrainians loved the U.S. But what was really, to me, moving was she pointed to 3 graves. There's a granddaughter who was 5 years old, granddaughter who was 7 years old, and her son who was 39 were all killed by the Russians in Bucha. And there's no way that you couldn't help but feel emotional, and helped you understand what the Ukrainian people have gone through.
It was quite a moving tour, obviously because of what took place there. But Borderlands Foundation was able to describe in great detail what the battles were like, defending the area and resisting Russian aggression, and also to put it into context in some instances relating back to wars that took place or battles that took place during World War II, taking advantage of some of the same terrain features. And while I followed what happened in Irpin and Bucha very closely when it happened, the additional context that Sam was able to provide with respect to the tactics added a lot of valuable understanding for me to really almost be there.
I took the Battle of Kiev tour, and it was so impactful. I think the biggest thing I got out of it is the storytelling, and that goes back to the people that were here and experienced it. It goes back to the war fighters, and it goes back to the community that really rallied around the folks that were on the front lines. And hearing these stories from professionals that know all about everything that happened here, it was an incredible experience.
When the history of the Russo-Ukrainian War is written, it is unquestionable that people will look back on this moment and realize that Ukraine winning the Battle of Kiev changed the arc of the 21st century. And winning specifically the battle at Hostomel Airport and the battles of Bucha and Irpin changed the Battle of Kiev. And to go there in person with a consummate historian that has collected all of this information from secondary sources and from the warfighters who fought it themselves, to stand on the still rubble of the Irpin River and see where the Russians got stopped, if that doesn't give you goosebumps, you're not a human being.
Oh, I think that it's an absolutely deserving mission. I think that everybody who has a chance should support it. It's impossible to convey to somebody who hasn't been here what it's like and what the Ukrainian people, the Ukrainian soldiers and civilians and the country in general has gone through with this, I'm trying to think of a polite word to describe Putin. There is none, so I'll just say this madman has done.
I mean, there's very few missions more noble than being able to defend people who defended, liberty and democracy and freedom. It's a very powerful and important thing to be able to continue to tell a story. To tell a story that everyone needs to hear about, and really just to share what took place.
The mission of storytelling, the heroes and the trauma that people go through is such an important element. It's part of healing. It's part of remembering why people went into conflict. It was completely by chance when we were over looking at a specific memorial. A grandmother came up and talked about her son and grandchildren that have been lost, and just a very powerful message around those stories, because we can talk about how many people died and it can be this many or that many or that many, but when it's an individual who says, I live over there, and just one day this happened where I lost family members in a tragic way that I shouldn't have, and those are the stories I think that we remember. And her being able to talk about that resolve and talk about the memories of her son and the importance of her son and her grandchildren, and then also just looking at the wall and saying, oh, I know that person, and that's my neighbor, and this is my neighbor's friend, and this is so, and she's not doing it as she's naming them, but in her own mind, it's her way of saying goodbye. And so those stories are both a closure and also a remembrance, so that those people are never forgotten.
The Borderlands Foundation mission is to make sure the Ukrainian heroes are never forgotten, and this is through history telling, through storytelling, and what's most important is the funding they get to keep these stories alive. So please consider supporting the Borderlands Foundation.
The work of the Borderlands Foundation is critically important because they're making sure that Ukraine's heroes and their stories are never forgotten. At the same time, it's not enough to win this war and remember the stories of the heroes. We also have to win the peace. And you can't win the peace with a traumatized population, both military veterans and civilians. So what the Borderlands Foundation is doing in order to heal that trauma, not only at the end of the war, but also in real time is critically important. If you're considering supporting the Borderlands Foundation, you should know that your money is going to help heal Ukrainian heroes and civilians.
Hello, everyone. Good morning to everyone here joining us in Washington, and Dobroho ranku, Dobry den to all our Ukrainian friends around the world. I'm Andrew Daniri, resident fellow at the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Center. I'll be moderating this panel, and like Katerina said, we are going to make this super dynamic, super quick. We have about 30 minutes left in our time here. So we're going to start off with Mr. Robin Seward is going to be our first speaker. He's online. Robin, please feel free to begin, and I'll ask the rest of our panelists joining in person here to please come up to the stage, and we will get to you all very shortly. Robin, over to you.
There are plenty of speakers. Just briefly, my background is as the former Deputy Special Defence Advisor of the UK in Ukraine, embedded within the Ministry of Defence and responsible for strategic reform of the security and defence sector from 2017 until 2022, about 4 months after the war commenced. There are a couple of things I really wanted to say, just to aid the sort of context of the discussion. If we go back just a short time ago to 2019, it was assessed at that time there were something like 370,000 veterans in the country, just from the conflict from 2014 onwards. And a total of something like 1.6 million veterans from all conflicts still alive in the country. When you consider then a population of 40-odd million, that is a huge percentage, and that doesn't account for the civilians. And I think we tend to leave them out quite a lot. That figure's increased dramatically. And it isn't that nothing can be done about it, that we need to provide expertise on the ground. We need to actually get people to go and seek help and so on. That's for sure. What's needed more than anything else, however, is to use the facilities and the capacity that already exists in the country and is available to be used. At the last estimate, I reckon there's something like 32 non-governmental organizations working in Ukraine. The problem is they tend to be working independently. They work in isolation because they need to preserve their resources and their funding sources. So they don't tend to work together. And the resultant of that is that although they do contact and access quite a wide number of people, it's random, it's not organized, and the level of therapy assistance that they can give is varied considerably. There's no consistency to it at all. And that's a big problem, especially later on when we discover that the stability of the country relies upon a population that has been treated appropriately for the damage that's been caused by the war. So that's the first point I would make. David Plaster, I think he's going to speak a little
Can I ask you
later.
to finish up in 1 minute? We have a ton of speakers left. 1 more minute. Thank you.
David Plaster, I think he's going to speak later, asked me to make a comment. We've worked together in the past in the country, and I would say there are a number of established non-governmental organizations, including his, which is an anomaly, that has access to a very wide base of non-governmental organizations and government actors at the senior level who can coordinate the activities of NGOs within Ukraine, given the opportunity to do so. But it is a matter of coordination that is lacking more than anything else. Clinical expertise does exist. It's varied all over the place. So as an element of that is needed, but it needs to be coordinated above all. And really, that's the message I would be sending. It needs also to be coordinated, not just in the US, where I'll give an example of, I know two practitioners currently in California within, if I can use the expression, spitting distance of each other, who simply did not know each other a matter of 2 weeks ago. And this is a story that goes on in the UK and elsewhere as well. So it is that key element that needs resolving, making use of the resources that already exist and the contacts that already exist within country and coordinating outside the country. Thank you.
Intervention off the top here. Like I said, we're going to try to make this as dynamic as possible. So to all our speakers here, I'm going to introduce each one of you. You'll have a chance to briefly, and I do mean briefly, talk about your work, and then we'll try to get to some questions at the very end before closing off by 11. So with that challenge, I'll give it to James Hutton, who's a former Assistant Secretary of Public and Intergovernmental Affairs at the Department of Veteran Affairs here in the United States, to kick us off.
Yep, that's me. So thank you very much. Yes, also, just briefly on a bio note, I was in the Army for 27 years, so I consider that a much bigger part of my life. But as an Army colonel in Iraq, I saw the medical system there, I saw the medical system here, I saw the medical system at VA, and they all have to work together. And one thing I would encourage you, and I heard a speaker earlier, I think it was Peter Ducey, who talked about not building buildings and hospitals, but getting care to soldiers and sailors and airmen and Marines where they live and allowing them to go to private facilities. And we had a thing called the Mission Act in the last administration, which allowed members or people that were getting their care at VA, when they couldn't get the care they needed there within a certain time or they didn't have the expertise, they were allowed to go into the private sector and receive care, which we paid for. Now, I know there's been some kind of pulling back from that now, but one thing you don't want your medical system to become is this behemoth. Our budget last year for the VA, or for the next year for the VA, is $370 billion. You can't afford that in Ukraine. What you can afford, though, is to center your focus on the veteran and get him the care or her the care wherever they need it, not so much building buildings. In our VA system, we have more than 170 hospitals. 170. And I'll give you one example of why you don't want this exactly that way. There was a hospital built in Denver, and it was originally budgeted for $600 million. And by the time it was completed, we had spent $1.6 billion. That's right, $100 billion over budget. And that wasn't helping a soldier or a Marine. That was helping build a building and staffing it with lots of officials. And you don't need all of that. You need some of it. You need policy, and you need people to distribute aid and benefits, but you don't need a lot of physical structures. And I don't think that Ukraine can afford that kind of system. Ours was built out of World War II, really. At the end of World War II, 16 million men had been in uniform. 16 million. So the country was not prepared for that kind of numbers. And they did build a lot of hospitals. And then as we grew and grew, and we continue to grow. When I started at VA, we had about 300,000. And this is in 2014. About 300,000 employees. When I left, there were 450,000. I'm not sure that that's delivering everything that we need, but one thing I can say about bipartisanship in this town, which is a rare thing, there's a lot of bipartisanship when it comes to VA, and that means spending a lot of money, and both sides are enjoying spending that money. Believe me, they do. In a lot of cases, it's necessary, but in some cases, it's not, and it should be. I would leave you just with this one thought, to be brief, is center your VA care, your Veterans Affairs policy on the veteran, not on the structure and not on the system, but on the soldier. And when you do that, you'll find solutions that don't cost as much and give better care.
James, thank you very much. Very efficient. We'll see if any of your fellow panelists can beat it. I should note that the topic of our panel is what should the veterans policy in Ukraine be for solving the socio-economic problems of demobilized military. And to take this conversation forward, we're going to go to Victor Pihulia, who joins us. He's the chairman of the Vinica regional organization, Vilni Tavirni. And Victor, over to you. Is Victor online or in person? No Victor. Moving right along, let's go to Douglas Jordan, who's an experienced strategic comms advisor with a deep focus on Ukraine and military issues. All right, we're going to keep moving. This is great. Oh, there he is. Okay. Do we have Victor? Victor, вітаю вас. Can you hear us?
Hello, dear colleagues. I'd like to thank...
We can hear you now. This is excellent.
Доброго дня, шановні колеги. Хочу подякувати. Hello, dear colleague. I'd like to thank the organizers for the possibility to participate in the event. It is dedicated to a very, pressing topic, namely developing efficient veteran policy. Today we discuss the issue social economical adaptation of veterans. I do agree with colleagues that we need to have a, systemic approach to this issue. In the beginning of full-scale war with Russia, we had almost 500,000 veterans, but we understand that after the end of the war, though unfortunately there will be, much more veterans. Therefore, after the end of the medical and psychological rehabilitation of all the servicemen, there should be a stage of professional integration, and this element plays a crucial role in veteran policy since it will help veterans to get back to the civilian life. We believe that the experience of the United States in terms of psychological rehabilitation veterans will be interesting for Ukraine, especially professional rehabilitation of the Department of Veteran Affairs helps veterans to get and to get a support and get a necessary job. And the beginning VI medic thoroughly studies the possible career paths of the veteran, and then they assess the professional, then they help with the job seeking, and then provide additional training. The advantages of the career consultant is available to persons that have just have been retired from the military. In my opinion, the experience of implementing this program will be useful for Ukraine because it supports veterans in the areas where they have professional experience. I'm a volunteer myself. Many times I've been to the front line, and the NGO, which was created by Vitaly Gersak, is the organization that cares about the issue, cares about the rehabilitation of veterans in the peaceful times. They conducted a lot of activities for families and veterans, and they provide support, and so they organize events where children and wife and the servicemen meet together, and when you see the happy eyes of the veteran who gets back to real life with a smile on his face, and wives and children thank us that a father, son, or brother gets back, is integrated into peaceful life with such events. We're very thankful to you for providing the opportunity to speak at such a conference. Thank you for understanding, and we do hope to get a support from you. I hope that we believe that the work that you're doing, your ample experience, I think, can be used and utilized in our country. Thank you very much for attempting to help our servicemen and veterans. So glory to Ukraine, and thank you very much again.
Really appreciate it. We're coming back to the DC group here. Michelle Poma from Superhuman Center in Ukraine. Please tell us about the work of your organization, especially in regards to the socioeconomic situation with veterans.
Okay, so talk about speed. Superhumans was built in 4 months. Superhumans is in Lviv, Ukraine. And as our founder, his name is Andrei Stavnitzer, said, it's the ultimate act of faith and defiance to build something during the war that's helping right now on the ground in Lviv. We've already helped over 400 amputees. And this happened we opened on April 14th of last year. We've now are coming to facial reconstruction. What I want to say about Superhumans is that there are 3 legs to a stool, and all these 3 legs are so important. We talked about mental health here, and we have a psychology department, and we're really working with their mental health, their physical bodies, of course, for rehabilitation, and then, of course, what will they do afterwards? And how can we keep a sense of purpose that's so important for the veterans? How can we keep that at the forefront? So that is and we don't have enough time to go into everything today, but Superhuman Center, if you look it up at superhumans.com, you'll see exactly the work that we're doing, and I think we would appreciate all the help. And on a different level, if you want something done, as our founders have done, Andrei Stavnitzer, the CEO is Olga Rudneva, so I think that some of you know, and Philip Grushko. I think that there are people who said, we're going to get this done. They built it in 4 months, and I think speed on the ground is everything. So that's really what I want to say today in this very short time.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Michelle.
you for having me.
Of course. You're the new leader in the clubhouse when it comes to efficiency. And I'll go back to our online speakers. Roman Sheremeta, he's the chairman of Ukrainian American House and the founding rector of American University in Kyiv. We do not have him. Excellent. Let's come back to DC then. Can we go to John Wagner, please? Do we have John Wagner? There he is.
All right, I'll try and move this up a little bit. I know that when Katerina asked me to come, and she said there's going to be a dynamic group. I think she was looking at me to try and help do that. James and I met in Iraq 20 years ago in the palace, and we both had similar experiences over there, although I've got 35 years of service to James 27. Not that that means anything, but we both worked over at Veterans Affairs, and we had a front line seat on looking at the policy making and the mishmash that goes on every day as they address what the needs and the wants are of both the American people, the families, and the soldiers and survivors. Back to the question here for the panel. What should be the answer in solving these socioeconomic issues of a demobilized military? I think there's a fallacy in the framing of the question to begin with. You can't solve it. I don't think that should be the attempt here. I think the attempt here should be, as they build this, that they look at building a framework in legislation that they can hang everything else on. It doesn't have to be the final answer. They're not building the Torah, they're not building the Bible, they're not building the Quran that has all the answers to all of life's problems in it. What they're trying to do is build a framework basing everything on the needs that they think they're going to see for the soldiers into the future. And going back to what you were saying, doing it now. Doing it now. Many of the commentary has been here on a post-war or a post-conflict soldier or veteran. I think you've got the one problem that is faced by very few countries, that it's ongoing now. Let's get it up. Let's get that structure built. Start preparing. Start going forward. Don't try to have every answer, because you can't do it. That will just build in an inefficiency and a stagnation trying to resolve that. Build a small framework. Let that tree grow and go from there. And I think we can get there very easily and very succinctly with the Ukrainian problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Let's go to Douglas Jordan, who should be joining us online now, an experienced strategic communications advisor with a deep focus on Ukraine and military issues. Do we have Douglas?
I'll go over them briefly. Okay.
Super.
So first off, I'm speaking for myself. I do not represent the government or my university. What I'd like to talk about is there's a U.S. model out there for veterans organizations. There's some history behind it, and there's some evolution. And I think that the U.S. can provide a model of how over 100 years, organizations such as the Veterans of Foreign Wars, the American Legion, Disabled American Veterans, they provide, and you'll see in the presentation when you download it, they provide 6 different things. They provide advocacy, they provide information, they provide representation to the government and to society. They fulfill a role of commemoration within the communities around Ukraine, and a sense of place. It's a place where veterans can gather, and it also creates a sense of fraternity and belonging. One of the things that's in my bio is I actually did research for the Veterans of Foreign Wars in 1999, so over 25 years ago. I looked at how the Veterans of Foreign Wars, how they're viewed within American society, and how they can basically look at how to reinvent themselves. And this was before 9/11. Important factors to look at in any veteran organization that we've found in the United States: they have to create a mission. They need to create structure and rules called bylaws. They select leadership. They have to create some sort of membership criteria. And within Ukraine, there will be the issue of volunteers versus formal people in the military. These organizations, these veterans organizations, will need to determine how they structure themselves, how they manage their money. Within the United States, they have buildings and property. How do they do those types of things? And finally, how do they provide service to the community and to the nation? I provided some links in the presentation and some screenshots of websites. What I think is very important is veterans organizations need to focus on the needs of the veterans. And one of the other colleagues, there's people who are developing NGOs, and they're developing policy. But within the United States, one of the things that was determined through history is veterans have to determine their own requirements and speak for themselves. Other presenters have addressed this issue. The solution that needs to be developed in Ukraine needs to be appropriate for Ukraine. The other thing is remote advising, such as conferences like this. We can work together. We don't have to be physically in the same room. We can collaborate virtually. I spent some time as an advisor in Ukraine from 2019 to 2020. And one of the things was you cannot let language get in the way, whether it's English or Ukrainian or terms. And one of the things I would say, and I found this to be very important, there's no one that knows everything. So I don't know, as you're collaborating and asking questions of yourself, I don't know is my contact information. I appreciate being invited, and I look forward to working with all of you. Thanks.
Spoke on the first veterans panel, before the ministry was even created, next to who would become the first 2 ministers and the chief of the committee, basically about a plan of action. At the time, the U.S. policy was, let's copy-paste the American VA system. That'll work. I was like, without explicitives, not today. There are great things. We do have the best thing. We have the biggest sample size of veterans in the entire world. At the same time, we also have a very ginormous bureaucracy. But I do believe that Ukraine has a solution for that, and I think that will be very interesting going forward because Ukraine also has bureaucracy, and they've been using tech in a way we have not been able to do so. So I will briefly go over some of the slides, but I want to first point out that we are, Veterans Affairs this day is actually part of the battlefield. Many soldiers feel like they're still on the battlefield, and the reason why is in a fifth-generation warfare format, you have this omnipresent battlefield. So you can't really leave the battlefield. They don't really tell you that when you go to the recruiter, right? And you have a situation where the enemy is continuously attacking you long after they've perished, long after the war has been declared over. The mission has been accomplished, and you still have to deal with those things when you go home. On top of that, Ukraine also has the scars of communism to compete with. So Russia's goal here for the past 500 plus years is the complete and utter extinction, genocide of the Ukrainian people. We should understand that when we ham-fistedly want to copy-paste our policies from the United States to Ukraine. Now, as somebody who's been in Ukraine for 13 plus years, long before there was a war, back when beer was still $1 and there wasn't a revolution, it was 8 hryvnias to $1 at the time. I, for more than 20-something years, have been speaking Russian because a lot of my family served in the military throughout the last nearly 300 years of America's history, and they impressed upon me a very big importance to be continuously vigilant, and also about how the Cold War wasn't really over. We just declared victory, and they still were like, well, we don't want to press a reset button. So when you look at that, and you look at that in Ukraine's history, you kind of see how things go forward and the way to grab. Now, the presentation, it covers a lot of things. Things I'm not going to talk about today because I value you and I respect you. And to quote the former SecDef, Jim Mattis, PowerPoints make us stupid. So out of respect for your intelligence, I will not go through it. You will hear mostly next slide when we go through things. So, well, Pavel, that was a test one. So basically, just going to talk about the need to bridge the gap, right? The need to bridge the gap between not just veterans and the government, but also America and Ukraine. And also, what can we learn from Ukraine? We shouldn't just spew our foreign policy onto other people. We should also be willing to learn. Just like when I was a professor at Shevchenko University, I came in every time to learn from my students. So next slide. Basically, we'll just talk about the general things. I think everybody knows that. There's a complex thing. Ask the veteran what they need. They'll tell you what they need. So that's a general map there of the country for those people who don't know. Some of those areas are currently temporarily occupied. But there are resources since 2018 that were developed actually with the VA and Ukrainian organizations where people who were professionals, instead of being talked down to, could be talked with about algorithmic plans about how they could be able to help people or get the right tools. It's kind of along the line that we would do with ACE, where you ask, care, and escort, but more on the provider level. So next slide. This is Ukraine, according to the Ministry of Internal Affairs, where I was a senior advisor to the Chief General of the National Guard for 17 to 19 and instructor for special operations. When we use this model, this was basically when you talk to anybody there, you had to break it down into this model. It's basically ask Ukraine how to build up a regional system that mimics that of the current regional militaries. So each military, when you in-process, you out-process in the region, and then that your stuff doesn't get lost. Just like they hand deliver you from the recruiting to MEPS to the military, and then when you out-process, they hand deliver the stuff, or digitally using DIA and other such tools directly into the VA, so there's no risk of human error. Now, the DIA system is great. It was actually partially developed by the Estonians, specifically to be interesting, and Estonia is a NATO partner. So it's another way you can get other NATO members, not just the United States. Remember, it's not an army of us, right, only. There are other people there that probably do care about this. Briefly, next slide. That's kind of our presence of partners. And next slide. This has been going on since, like I said, 2016, community-based organizations who said, hey, we can't wait for the government to build a VA. The Russians are continuing to destroy our heroes off the battlefield at home through suicide. Because when we kill ourselves, when we cease that life, we no longer have any other solutions. So the goal is to wipe that option off the table. Push-ups, in my experience, have not stopped anybody. Calling your buddies, 22 a month instead of 22 push-ups a day. While your biceps might suffer, you actually might have better results. Next slide, just kind of go through a bunch of partners and people. They're all important, great. Next slide, basically break it down to an operational level. So you engage people at the city, because in the city of Dnipropetrovsk in 2017, there were more than 300 NGOs, veteran-focused, that had the name ATO, or Anti-Terrorist Operation, within the name, just in the city of Dnipro. That paired with the fact that there was more than 370 political parties in Ukraine, I think there's more than enough players in the game that really care, or at least they put that in their name. Let's go on the next slide. So regionally, again,
David,
going
one
back to
more
this.
minute, if I can interrupt quickly.
Sure.
We got 3 more speakers. Thank you.
Sure. Sure. So basically, the regional approach, that's when you engage the government more. So you have representatives from your oblast who understand local time solutions, going again, again, and again. And basically, it's how government should work when we hold them accountable to it. That's really it. There's a whole lot of references in here, but, that's all I really have to say about that. So I thank you very much for your time. If you had a good time here, thank your hosts and stuff. Thank everybody else. If you don't feel thanked enough, thank you. But I'll use the words, imagine my compliment is the word you want to hear right now, okay? So nothing else.
Super. Thank you, David. So we're going to go to 2 speakers who I believe are online, but if they're not, we'll finish up with Mr. John Haidt in person. First up, we have Valentina Schulz, deputy head of the NGO Vilna Tavirny, and a member of the Odessa District Council. Do we have her online? We may not. What about Anna Taranenko, senior lecturer? Okay, then that means, John, you get to take us home. Mr. John Haidt is a consultant who specializes in strategic comms, policy development, and Israel advocacy. John, over to you.
Amazing. I'm also, in another life, I'm a school psychologist, and I'll speak on that a little bit today. I think obviously, we have incredible experts. A brother in psychology spoke earlier, the major, I don't know, he's still here somewhere, but that was very, very good. I think what I think about as a school psychologist with a focus on children and families is, I don't need to explain to anyone, especially the people of Ukraine, how different their situation is than in the United States, where unless the child or the family had a person, a parent serving, then the government essentially worked hard to isolate the war experience, I think, from a lot of people. Clearly, there's none of that even remotely possible in Ukraine. So I think there needs to be much more focus on children and families. Thankfully, many wonderful services can be delivered in schools or remotely. So I think supporting the veteran is also really, really about supporting the family to help them understand not only how to work through their own trauma that they experienced, which will be significant and already is, but also how to understand the differences in their parent behaviorally and emotionally. I think those things are really critical. So in that way, supporting a child or children, whether it's in school or within the community, will, you can't even put a price tag on that. The effect not only is that going to have on the veteran, but the functioning of the family. And that I can understate how critical that will be in this situation. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you, John. I've just been informed that we actually now may have Ms. Schulz and Ms. Taranenko online. If we can, let's please go to, do we have Valentina or Anna on the screen here? Anna, all right. Anna Taranenko, senior lecturer at the Department of International Relations at the National University Kyiv Mohyla Academy. Anna, thank you for joining us. 2 minutes, over to you. Thank you.
Dear colleagues, it's an honor. Can you hear me well? Okay, fine. Yes, so just very briefly, my topic is about Telegram-based resistance of Ukrainian government-led volunteer forces. And just to, the gist of it is that it's a research project which was conducted by my colleagues and me, the three of us, Katrina Sirnyuk-Dolgareva and Ksenia Yurtaeva, under our fellowship at the University of Michigan, the Weiser Center for Europe and Eurasia. And so the focus of this research is more on social media and how social media, in particular Telegram, was used during the first year of the full-scale Russian invasion. And so the most important takeaway from that research is that actually among strategic communication, information and psychological operations are two most important types and the most relevant types of strategic communication used during this first year of the full-scale invasion. And so the main idea, we looked at two Telegram channels, the Stop Russian RIA and the second one, Internet Vійська Ukraine. And the idea was to see how Ukrainian government mobilized civil society members, so volunteers, Ukrainians, but not necessarily Telegram users, in order to resist the Russian aggression and to guarantee information and cognitive security of Ukrainians. And so our findings are that psychological operations, psychological warfare is critical, and that Telegram is effectively used by Ukraine in countering Russian cyber aggression and disinformation. It's a communication platform between government and volunteers, which is useful for coordinating their efforts. It's a tool to anonymously target Russian and pro-Russian, pro-war Telegram channels in order to ban disinformation, propaganda, hostile and sensitive content. And also it's a way to publicize among general public successful cases of counteraction and enhance further resilience. And so among information operations, the most crucial ones are such as spreading awareness and informing about the war, different audiences, domestic as well as international. And as to psychological operations, the important aspects are trolling or demoralizing the enemies while keeping the morale high of Ukrainians, civilians and military. So we happy to further discuss and share the results of this research with those who are interested. And thank you very much for the opportunity. Wishing all the best to all of us, to the participants. Thank you.
She brings up a good point. We'll be able to share more information with our audience after the fact via email. I've been told that Valentina is in fact not online, so we're gonna, she is online. Yeah, I'll just talk then for a minute. Not actually. Valentina, would you like to wait? Yeah, no problem. Sure, then I guess maybe a lightning round to our panelists, especially in person here. You know, if... Uh-huh. Valentina, you're with us. Excellent. Thank you for joining us. Very briefly, please tell us what you're up to and your activities supporting veterans in Ukraine.
Invasion, I joined military academy because I understand that our resources, human resources, are limited, and it's very important to involve more women in armed forces of Ukraine. We have heard many calls for women to join armed forces, and so I joined military academy to help military personnel and to defend my country. I volunteer from the first days of a war. I am constantly in Odessa and Mykolaiv region, bringing humanitarian aid and assisting various humanitarian organizations. We get many sad news, and as the war continues, we hear more and more sad news. We hear about suicides, and as we study American experience, we see that you have experienced such sad news as well. So this is our task, to learn from your experience, to adapt it to our Ukrainian realities, to make sure that we could minimize suicides in Ukraine, so our veterans could be returned to society as strong people rebuilding our nation. Thank you very much. Thank you for your assistance. We value it very much.
Thanks for joining us and for your flexibility. And that goes to all our speakers here, especially your willingness to adapt to our time constraints. Very much appreciated. And thank you to our audience here as well. We've been talking about how to solve and combat the socio-economic problems of the demobilized military in Ukraine. I'm Andrew Danieri. Thank you very much to our conference sponsors for having me and the rest of us here. And I'll turn it over for some closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you to our speakers. I will summarize a bit. I will thank again to all who was involvement in this process of building this communicational platform. That first part was in Kyiv with really over 55 speakers from 8 countries. We really didn't expect such interest and such involvement. You know, usually we invite a lot of people, then we think that, okay, maybe like 30% will be finally involved. So we involved like 58 people in Ukraine in first part of Kyiv event, but 55 confirmed, and 3 they didn't confirm just because they had some personal issues, but they joined us later. So we from our country, from Ukraine, we thank very much to everyone, because that you realize that this is not only Ukrainian problem, that it's actually world problem, because our Ukrainians who will have more problems in Ukraine, they will move and migrate to another countries. And talking about veterans issues, and not only veterans, but militaries who actually serving now, like White Ribbon Movement organization, which is fighting domestic violence in over 90 countries, we realize that we also have to be involved, because dealing with veteran issues today, it's like kind of prevention of potential domestic violence tomorrow. And we don't want to have in our country, in Ukraine, 1 million cases of some addictions or some problems or violence problems. And actually, it's not, we cannot pursue veterans as a problem, because they are heroes, actually. They are heroes that fighting for all of us, for democratic values, for our country, for our land, for our people, for their families, for the whole world. So it's like fight with dictatorship, fight for the values. Thank you again one more time to the initiator of this report that you could see. We have few copies that you can look through live, and of course all speakers and participants and guests would be provided this online on email, or you can use QR code and follow to see it online. So we thanks to Vitaly Gersak and the organization Vilni Tavirny for this report, for working, for involving some think tanks and some scientists to work on this roadmap, and I hope we all together gonna develop more and more and more, and we'll build the best veteran policy in our country, and then we'll be able to share with other countries to develop and update their policies. So thank you all of you very much. We still for a while, unfortunately we couldn't hear today all our initiators and speakers, because some of them are like militaries and serving, and there were some restrictions, they couldn't leave the country. Also one military girl, I was just chatting, she's supposed to join us online, but she told me like, sorry, I'm already on positions, there is a fire, I cannot. I told, okay, in half an hour maybe you can, or in 10 minutes. I don't know, sorry, it's still fire, I cannot, it's bad connection. I asked her like, maybe you can make a small video. She told me like, I was managed to send you message from the, I don't know, like 10 attempt. I can, okay. I mean, it's all very like tricky and so weird. Like we're staying here, we're chatting with the girl. She told, no, I cannot join you. I support you, but I cannot join you because there is too heavy fire. It's very loud and bad connection. I mean, it's some tricky, weird world, but it is as it is. Like we all have these challenges. We all have to overcome that. So please be involved. Please read the documents, this roadmap. Please be involved with your comments, with the contact with the organization who initiated, who prepared this roadmap report. And thank you again.
Everyone, my name is Katerina Pop. I'm Junior Sergeant of Armored Force of Ukraine. I'm sorry I did join you on Zoom. It's very bad internet connection. I want to tell you about adaptation, the veteran policy, and that it is necessary right now. It is time to start the future for our veterans at this moment. Over the last year, we have been working on programs for rehabilitation and social adaptation of our soldiers and veterans with the Department of the Moral and Psychology Support of our military unit, and we have unbelievable result. Implementing this program is a very good idea if we do it right now. So let's start. Thank you for support and thank you for attention. Have a nice day.